Stop saying hi, how are you? Because that one sentence is the exact reason she forgets you the moment you walk away. I know that sounds harsh, but stay with me, because what you're about to hear will completely change the way you understand attraction. You've been taught that being polite, being nice, being normal is the right way to approach a woman. But what if I told you that normal is exactly what's making you invisible? What if the very habits you believe are safe are the same habits that quietly push you into the background of her attention? Every day, she hears the same words, the same tone, the same predictable energy from men who all blend into one another. And without realizing it, you've been doing the same thing, hoping for a different outcome. But attraction doesn't reward effort. It responds to difference. It responds to presence. It responds to a man who doesn't sound like everyone else. In this video, you're going to understand something most men never realize, even after years of trying. You're going to see why it's not about having better lines, but about becoming the kind of man whose words actually carry weight. And once you see it, you won't be able to go back to the old way of speaking, because it will feel weak, forced, and completely out of alignment with who you could be. So don't skip this. Don't assume you already know this, because by the end of this, you will either continue being ignored or you will start being remembered. Let me take you deeper into this idea of predictability, because this is where most men unknowingly disqualify themselves before they're even given a chance. When you say something like, "Hi, how are you?" you're not just starting a conversation, you're signaling your position. You are placing yourself in a long line of men who are waiting to be acknowledged, hoping to be accepted, quietly asking for permission to exist in her attention. And the problem is not politeness. The problem is that there is no identity in it. There is no distinction. There is nothing that makes her pause and think, "This one is different." Human beings are pattern recognition machines. The brain is constantly scanning for what is familiar and what is new. Familiar things are processed quickly and dismissed just as quickly. New things, however, interrupt the mind. They create a moment of focus, and attraction at its core begins in that interruption. So when you approach a woman with the same predictable language she has heard 100 times, her brain does not engage. It categorizes you instantly, not because she's judging you unfairly, but because you've given her nothing else to work with. You've made yourself easy to understand, therefore easy to ignore. This is why breaking the pattern is not just a tactic, it's a psychological necessity. When you say something slightly unexpected, something that carries your perspective, you disrupt that automatic filtering process. Now she has to think, now she has to feel, and in that moment of engagement, you've already separated yourself from the majority. But here's where most people misunderstand this concept. They think breaking the pattern means being outrageous, loud, or artificially clever. That's not what creates attraction. In fact, trying too hard often exposes insecurity. The goal is not to shock for attention. It is to reveal a sense of self that is calm, observant, and unapologetically present. For example, if you say, "You don't seem like someone who enjoys small talk," you're not just being different, you're making an observation. You're showing that you are paying attention, that you have a perspective, that you are not afraid to express it. And that alone creates intrigue, because now the interaction is no longer generic. It becomes personal. And personal is where emotional engagement begins. Understand this carefully. Attraction is not built on information, it is built on emotion. A woman does not feel drawn to you because you asked polite questions. She feels drawn to you because, in some subtle way, you made her experience something outside her normal routine. You shifted her emotional state, even slightly. Predictability keeps emotions flat. Unpredictability creates movement. And human beings are always drawn toward what makes them feel something. This is why the most attractive individuals are not necessarily the most perfect in appearance or the most impressive in status. They are the ones who create a different kind of experience. They bring a certain unpredictability, not chaos, but a controlled sense of uniqueness that keeps the interaction alive. Now, this requires something that most men avoid, the willingness to take a social risk, because the moment you step outside predictable behavior, you step outside guaranteed approval. Not everyone will respond positively, not everyone will understand you, and that's exactly the point. If everyone likes you, it means you are too generic. Distinctiveness always comes with a level of polarization. Some people will be drawn to you, others won't. But the ones who are drawn to you will feel it more strongly because what you are presenting is real, not diluted. And this is where confidence quietly reveals itself, not in loud statements or forced dominance, but in the comfort of expressing something that might not be universally accepted. When you break the pattern, you are communicating something deeper than words. You are saying, without saying it, I am not here to blend in, I am here as I am. And that message is far more powerful than any rehearsed line. But let's take this one step further, because there is a philosophical layer beneath all of this. Predictability is often a form of self-protection. It is the mind's way of avoiding rejection. If I say what everyone else says, I minimize the risk of standing out in a negative way. But in doing so, you also eliminate the possibility of standing out in a positive way. You trade potential attraction for guaranteed invisibility. And that is a decision most people make unconsciously. So when you choose to break the pattern, you are not just changing your words, you are changing your relationship with fear. You are deciding that being seen, even imperfectly, is more valuable than being ignored safely. That shift transforms how you show up in every interaction. Your voice becomes steadier. Your presence becomes more grounded. You are no longer trying to fit into a script. You are creating the moment as it happens. And people feel that. They may not be able to explain it, but they recognize it. There is a certain weight to someone who is not operating from habit, but from awareness. So the next time you find yourself about to say something predictable, pause for a second, ask yourself, what is the more honest observation here? What is something I genuinely notice, something that reflects how I see this moment, and say that instead? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be clever. It just has to be yours. Because the moment your words become an extension of your perspective, rather than a repetition of social conditioning, you stop being forgettable. And that is where everything begins to change. If you want to be remembered, if you want to create real attraction, then understand this clearly. People don't connect with what is safe. They connect with what is real. And real is never predictable. Now let's move into something far more important than the words themselves, because this is where most men completely misunderstand attraction. They obsess over what to say, how to say it, which line will work, which phrase will impress. But what they fail to see is that words are only the surface. Beneath the words, there is something far more powerful that determines how those words are received, and that is your energy. You can say the most perfectly crafted sentence, but if it comes from hesitation, insecurity, or a need for approval, it will collapse the moment it leaves your mouth. And you can say something simple, even imperfect, but if it comes from certainty, calmness, and self-assurance, it will carry weight. It will land, it will be felt, because people do not respond to language the way you think they do. They respond to emotional signals. They respond to tone, to presence, to the subtle cues that reveal how you feel about yourself in that moment. This is why two men can say the exact same words, and one is ignored while the other is intriguing. The difference is not the sentence. The difference is the internal state behind it. When you say, "Hi, how are you?" from a place of uncertainty, what she feels is not politeness. What she feels is hesitation. She senses that you are waiting, that you are unsure, that you are quietly hoping she will respond in a way that validates you. And that emotional signal immediately lowers your perceived value because it places her in the position of authority. Attraction does not grow in that dynamic, but when a man speaks from a grounded sense of self, everything changes. His voice slows down, his words are not rushed. There is no urgency to be liked. There is no pressure in his delivery. And that absence of pressure is exactly what creates comfort and intrigue at the same time. You have to understand this clearly. Neediness is loud, even when your words are quiet. And confidence is quiet, even when your words are simple. This is why energy matters more than language. Now, when we talk about energy, we are not speaking about something mystical or abstract. We are speaking about psychological alignment, the congruence between what you say and what you believe about yourself. If you don't believe you are valuable, your behavior will reveal that, no matter how carefully you choose your words. This is why memorized lines fail, because they create a disconnect. You are saying something that does not match your internal state, and people are incredibly sensitive to that mismatch. They may not consciously analyze it, but they feel it immediately. And when there is a mismatch, trust breaks down. On the other hand, when your words come from a place of genuine self-assurance, there is no contradiction. Your tone, your body language, your pacing, your eye contact, they all align. And that alignment creates a sense of authenticity that is naturally attractive. So the real question is not, "What should I say?" The real question is, from what state am I speaking? Are you speaking to impress, or are you speaking to express? Are you speaking to gain approval, or are you speaking from self-respect? Are you speaking because you feel you need something, or because you choose to engage? That distinction changes everything, because when you no longer need a specific outcome, your behavior becomes relaxed. You are not calculating every word. You are not overthinking every reaction. You are simply present. And presence is one of the most underestimated forms of confidence. Most men are not present when they interact with a woman. They are in their heads, analyzing, anticipating, worrying about what to say next, how they are being perceived, whether they are doing it right. And this internal noise creates tension. It disconnects them from the moment. But a man who is present is different. He listens, he observes, he responds naturally. There is a fluidity in his communication, because he is not trying to control the outcome. He is engaged in the experience itself, and that is where attraction starts to deepen, because now the interaction feels real. It feels unforced. It feels like something that is unfolding naturally, rather than something that is being engineered. And people are always drawn to what feels effortless. But let's be honest, this level of calmness does not come from technique. It comes from self-perception, from how you see yourself when no one is watching. If you see yourself as someone who needs validation, your energy will reflect that. If you see yourself as someone who has value, independently of others' opinions, your energy will reflect that too. So the work is internal. It is about building a sense of self that is not dependent on immediate feedback. It is about becoming comfortable with silence, with uncertainty, with not always being liked. Because when you are no longer afraid of those things, your entire presence changes. You stop chasing reactions, you stop forcing conversations, you stop trying to prove yourself, and in that space, something powerful happens. You become magnetic, not because you are trying to attract, but because you are no longer repelling with neediness, and this is the paradox most people struggle to understand. The more you try to control how you are perceived, the less natural you become, and the less natural you become, the less attractive you appear. But when you let go of that control, when you trust your own voice, your own perspective, your own way of expressing, your energy stabilizes. It becomes consistent, and consistency creates trust, even in the early stages of interaction. So when you speak, don't focus on crafting the perfect line. Focus on delivering your words from a place of calm certainty. Let your tone be steady. Let your pace be unhurried. Let your presence do the work that your words cannot do alone. Because ultimately, attraction is not built on what you say in a single moment. It is built on how you make someone feel in your presence over time, and that feeling is shaped by your energy. So if you want to change your results, don't just change your language. Change the state from which your language emerges. Because the truth is simple, even if it is uncomfortable. Your words introduce you, but your energy defines you. Now we come to the point where everything either comes together or falls apart. Because even if you understand how to break the pattern, even if you understand that energy matters more than words, there is still one mistake that quietly destroys attraction for most men. And that mistake is this constant urge to impress. From a very early age, many men are conditioned to believe that they must prove their worth. Prove it through success, through intelligence, through humor, through status, through how well they can perform in front of others. So when they meet a woman, they don't enter the interaction as themselves. They enter as a version of themselves that is trying to win. And the moment you try to win someone, you have already placed them above you. You may not say it directly, but your behavior reveals it. You begin to filter your thoughts. You calculate your responses. You hold back anything that might be perceived as risky. You present only what you believe will be accepted, and in doing so, you slowly erase the very thing that makes you interesting, your individuality. Because attraction is not built on perfection. It is built on authenticity. When you are trying to impress, you are no longer authentic. You are performing, and performance always carries tension. There is a subtle pressure in it, a sense that something is being managed or controlled. And people can feel that even if they cannot explain it. This is why so many interactions feel flat even when everything seems right on the surface. The words are polite, the conversation flows, but there is no depth, no spark, no emotional pull, because nothing real is being expressed. Now contrast that with a man who is not trying to impress, but simply to express. He says what he genuinely thinks. He shares what he genuinely notices. He allows his personality to come through without constantly editing it for approval. There is a naturalness in the way he communicates because he is not trying to create an image. He is simply being present with who he is. And that creates something rare clarity. When you express yourself honestly, people know where they stand with you. There is no confusion, no guessing, no hidden agenda. And that clarity is incredibly attractive because it removes the uncertainty that often makes interactions feel unstable. But more importantly, it creates emotional impact because when you express something real, even something simple, it carries weight. It lands differently. It stays with the other person because it came from a place of truth rather than strategy. Now, this does not mean saying everything that comes to your mind without awareness. Expression is not recklessness. It is grounded in observation, in presence, in emotional intelligence. It is about choosing to communicate from your perspective rather than from fear. For example, instead of trying to impress her with humor or exaggerated confidence, you might say something like, "You seem very composed, but I get the sense there's more depth there than you show." At first, that is not a performance, that is an observation. It invites engagement without forcing it. And that is the key difference. When you try to impress, you push for a reaction. When you express, you allow a reaction. One creates pressure, the other creates space, and people are always more drawn to spaces where they feel free to respond, rather than situations where they feel expected to react in a certain way. But let's go even deeper, because this is not just about communication, it is about identity. A man who is constantly trying to impress is, at his core, unsure of his own value. He believes that who he is, naturally, is not enough, so he compensates, he adds layers, he builds a version of himself that he hopes will be accepted. But the problem with this approach is that it creates dependency, because now your sense of worth is tied to how others respond to that performance. If they approve, you feel validated. If they don't, you feel diminished, and that is a fragile way to live. On the other hand, a man who expresses himself does not rely on external validation in the same way. His sense of worth comes from within. He knows who he is, and he allows that to be seen. Not everyone will resonate with it, and that is perfectly fine, because his goal is not universal approval. His goal is genuine connection, and genuine connection can only happen when something real is present on both sides. This is why expression is more powerful than impression, because it filters. It naturally attracts those who align with you, and gently repels those who do not. It saves time, energy, and emotional confusion, and most importantly, it creates interactions that actually mean something. So the next time you find yourself wanting to impress, pause for a moment, notice the impulse, ask yourself, what am I trying to prove here, and to whom? Then shift your focus. Instead of thinking, how can I make her like me? Ask, what do I genuinely think in this moment? And say that, not perfectly, not strategically, just honestly, because the moment you stop performing and start expressing, you change the entire dynamic. You move from seeking attention to creating presence, from chasing approval to offering authenticity. And that shift is what makes you stand out in a way that no rehearsed line ever could. Attraction is not built on who you pretend to be. It is built on who you are when you stop pretending. And if there is one thing to take away from all of this, it is this: people may forget what you tried to show them, but they will always remember what you had the courage to reveal.